and welcome to another installment of the Inspiration of Heroes series. This time around, we have the Fan Man himself. Welcome, Fan Man.
Thank you, Professor Geek. It's an honor to be here, and I'm going to restrain myself from my usual practices because I know that this is a pretty top flight operation you got going here, and by God, I don't want to damage it.
We're going to have a lot of fun, I know. But quickly, though, I do want to explain, because some people have asked me, where the heck did the Star Wars book study stream go from Thursday? I'd like to know the same thing. The very next morning, YouTube sent me an email, and they said that stream violated community guidelines. Same thing. And I thought, what in the world are they talking about? I mean, we didn't even get remotely racy or anything. We stuck to the text. It was just a simple book study stream. And it didn't say copyright issues, because I used, one time I used some still images of the Thrawn Trilogy comic from Read Comics Online. I didn't go through and show the whole comic. I just showed some still images, and that stream was demonetized. So I hadn't done that since then. I'll just go and look at like a Google image search. Just find things you can easily find on Google Images that are everywhere out there. And but it didn't say copyright. It said community guidelines strike. Wouldn't tell me what it was for, what was done. Wouldn't tell me who flagged the video or anything, because you're a peasant and YouTube's God, and you shut up and deal with it. So of course I appealed it, but haven't heard a single word from them. It's really incredibly discouraging from continue putting out content like that if they can just take it away with no reason or explanation whatsoever, and not even bother getting back to you about it. It's really, really frustrating.
Well,
so
Daniel Heron has a theory as to what happened in his super chat there.
It was my duct tape zip ties handcuff comment. I don't think it was that, Daniel Heron. That was pretty innocuous. That was funny. I don't think it was that. The things that have been said on my channel before, that's the stream they want to get for community guidelines. It's like, maybe somebody said something in the chat, like none of our usual crowd here, but maybe somebody just came in and laid out something really foul or racist or something. I mean, it looks like people would let me know if that happened, but I don't know.
Request more information from the overlords at the Tube, or probably not? No, you not let you know details.
No, you can apologize for your existence. That's about it. No, I appealed the video, which is just just a blank appeal, and then they'll just tell you no, or whatever. So I have no idea. I'm gonna keep doing whatever I can, but the ball's in their court now. I've sent the appeal in, so we'll see. But hopefully, it was just the YouTube bots picking up something random and stupid, and it'll get reinstated. I hope, but we'll find out. So, but that's just the explanation of that stream. We'll get back to our business at hand. Welcome to the chat here. I think, unless my chat updated or didn't get the earliest one, I think Dark Stranger was earliest. So welcome to Dark Stranger, Brian Gilmartin, Paladin Demo. Do see some channel members in here with Mrs. Nanette Pacelli, our first channel member. Big Al is present. Spidey Rules, Elijah Brown, Casey Scott, all of our usual folks up in here. So welcome everybody to hanging out with us tonight. Thanks for dropping by and listening to the stream. So I know that a lot of you have heard at least one or two of the ones I did so far. We had Big Al on, and then Sound Engraver was last week. And Fan Man from the beginning was one of the ones I was wanting on here as well. We're going to get Troy Nanette. I'm going to get Alex Starr, our Star Wars friend, in here, as well as some others eventually. But they're just kind of impromptu, when I can get around to doing them. And we this is what this channel is about at its heart, is talking about why heroes are inspiring, how they inspire us specifically. And I'm usually so academic about it when I'm talking about the examples and the mythological things like that, that the one thing I realized I was kind of missing from that picture was really getting into some of the specifics of how they inspire this person to do this. And I can give some, examples, but that's not the same thing. And I don't want to turn it into like a confessional channel of my life or anything like that either. So I thought it would be good to start a series like this where we just have some people on, who I know that, heroes mean a great deal to them, and they can give, some examples as much as they're willing to share from their life and everything. And Famine and I used to do a podcast together called Superman Lives, which we talked a lot about Superman. So obviously we share that love, and we've talked about, his inspiration in our lives and stuff like that. But we're going to talk about that again and many others. And we'll certainly have Fan Man back for another round of this stuff, because I know he's got a lot of, he's like me, he's got a lot of heroes in the 10, a lot of them to talk about.
I have quite a long list, and I told the professor this will be part 1 of 2. And,
Instead of 2. Yeah, right.
He said, what is it that you told me that I'm the biggest what? You use some kind of
such the biggest diva I've had on here, because I ask all my guests, I say, what are some of the heroes you'll be talking about so I can put them in the thumbnail? I knew Superman was going to be one. So just give me another. I said, you talk about as many as you want, but we'll just put a few in the thumbnail. Not only did he give me the heroes he wanted to talk about, but then he also gave me the images that he wanted shown. And no, not that one. And make sure it's Sisko in the red uniform, not the black uniform. And like, you are such a diva. Owen Lister for $1.99. Thank you very much. Said, did you and Fan Man get my Alex Ross videos I tweeted? Yes, that was the one about.
Yeah, I'd seen those before. They're excellent. Yes.
Yeah, the one about the costuming in the movies. I remember you telling us about that on a stream, and I did see the tweet, but I didn't have time to actually look at the video yet. So that's still on my list of watching. So.
That's a fascinating one, the costume one, because Alex Ross, since the turn of the century, well, no, it was a little after 2000 when he really started getting popular. He really has never. He's kind of like you. He doesn't like to step on toes, so which is probably why he still has a job and a career.
Yeah.
And so he's been very cautious in saying what he thinks about stuff like Man of Steel or costumes, but what he has said has been very damning if you're looking, to see what he's saying. And he's got a fascinating idea about costume design in these superhero movies. He really says, and I don't know if he means, I think he understands it wouldn't work literally, but that the way to really convey the superheroic paradigm visually would be for the actors and actresses to be naked and their bodies painted, because the suits are painted on in the comics, and that evokes, the imagery of Greek gods and goddesses and all that kind of stuff. And that when you get somebody to work out, his example is Christopher Reeve. You get somebody to work out like Christopher Reeve, who was 6'4" and was very well defined, and then you cover it up with padding, and the padding wasn't muscle; it was just the suit itself, and you kind of defeat the purpose of it. And so he just kind of looks. He doesn't look like he'd look even more like Superman was his point. So it's a really good video. To check it out. Yeah, if you want to drop that in there, Daniel Herron, drop that link in there because I think people would enjoy it.
All right, hang on. Big Al said that my audio is really bad. Am I sounding different than I usually do, or?
You sounded a little far away, and now you sound a little closer. Were you?
I might have had the wrong mic enabled again or something. I don't know. But I sound okay now, though.
You do now. I think.
Okay.
What do you folks think? He sounds all right in there in the chat? Because to me, you sound good. Yeah, you sound.
Yeah, Richard Wagner said it's fixed now. Okay.
You're closer to the mic now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just had the mic for the laptop enabled, which is literally farther away from me. So, yeah. We're good. So, which of these heroes would you like to start with, Chris? You don't have to start with Superman. I know that'll come up eventually, but whoever you'd like to start with.
Well, I don't know. I have them in an order here, but I mean, I'm certainly open to jumping around. I kind of want to start with Star Trek, which is you and I talked before the show, and so I want to do this delicately, as I'm sure we all look at things from different perspectives, and so I want to be respectful of that. I think everybody's heart right now is heavy with what's going on in our country. And I'm not talking about coronavirus. I'm talking about George Floyd and protests and all this. And what I think is important to talk about in this time is what this whole series is designed for, and to highlight that these are not just franchises. They're not IPs as the corporations that own them see them, and they're not just kids entertainment. They're not just nerd entertainment, as people who aren't fans might dismiss it. They are inspirational, and if they can inspire us now in these times, and if we can't use them to inspire other people, then really maybe they aren't. Maybe they are just kids entertainment. Maybe they are just a product. And so I think it's important in this time to really talk about that. And for me, all of this has been happening, and I've been aware of it. I know whether people talk about it on social media or ever talk about it outside of their circle of friends and family, I know it reaches people. I know it bothers them, any kind of violence, because we're human beings and we react to that. And so I've been watching all this, and I've always really mourned when this has happened. And I think that this is a serious issue, police brutality. But that's obviously not something we're going to get deep into. But there's a human element here that we can draw inspiration and instruction about in these heroes. And so Saturday night, I just finished telling my wife and my children, because lately they've been saying, hey, when you're dead, what are we going to do with all of your collectibles? And I'm like, are y'all playing? Should I not drink anything you hand me? Is that is there an assassination coming? What's happening? But I said, well, I'll tell you what I would really like is if I ever found out I was terminal, on my bucket list is that you guys would watch Svengoolie with me on Saturday nights, because they won't, and then I watched Star Trek with me. And I was just throwing out some things to see what reaction I would get. And as we're talking about this, Svengoolie is over, and this was the choice of the programmers this past Saturday night. It was Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. For those who perhaps aren't Star Trek the original series fans, this is the depending on who you talk to, famous infamous episode, 3rd season, that has Frank Gorshin. And I don't know the other actor's name, but they're 2 members of a race, and everybody knows and has seen the pictures of these guys. In fact, they're in my avatar if you haven't. But one side white, one side black. And the only difference between them as a species is that there is a group of people who have a right side that's black and a left side that's white, and vice versa is the other group. And they're killing each other over it. And I've read articles and I've read various reviews and seen reviews over the years. It's very heavy-handed, and it doesn't have the subtlety or quality of commentary that other Star Trek episodes have. But I look at it as it's a year after Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated, and I think you had to be very overt to try to send the message of just how ludicrous it is. And so I bring all that up and I put that in this context here because Star Trek for me was one of the reasons this has stirred up a lot of stuff for me. And I've been talking about it with my girls. I grew up, I live in the deep South. My parents, my grandparents, probably would not necessarily self-identify as racists, but they are from their words and their actions. And I love them. I don't think it's completely intentional. I do give them the benefit of that generation and what they heard growing up. At the same time, once you're an adult, to me, then you really it's on you to learn better. And one of the things that formed my conscience, and I was trying to explain this to my 14-year-old, is that your parents should form your conscience. They should form your morality, but they may fail. They will fail because no parent is perfect. We aren't, sadly, Jonathan and Martha Kent. If we all had Jonathan and Martha Kent as parents, we would not have the world we have, or even Thomas and Martha Wayne. But the great thing is that there are many other things out there besides our parents, our faith, if that applies to us, our friends, inspirational people, and of course these franchises that we talk about, as we call them, modern myth. And for me, it was the morality of comics, but it was also the morality of Star Trek. And Star Trek, from a very early age, that was kind of like the wallpaper of my geek life as a kid. Superheroes, my brother's comics, various animated superhero shows, the Superman films, the Star Wars films, the Star Trek live action films, and the TV series, although I didn't see that as much as I would until later. And then in 87, bam, I was 11, and here's Star Trek: The Next Generation. I became a huge fan, and that extended back to the original series, and I continued to be a fan of the films. And of the series, my 2 favorite are the original series and Deep Space Nine. And so I'll talk a little bit about Ben Sisko, I guess, now, or in context of Star Trek. But Star Trek really did resonate for me because I was growing up in a small town in the deep, deep South. You go any further south, really, and you're going to drop into the Gulf of Mexico. And,
yeah, that's true.
we're Abbeville, Louisiana, where I grew up, is very far. It's only about maybe 30 minutes from the coast. So I grew up and kind of heard those things, and I saw those things happening, and I didn't necessarily have that many people who didn't look like me around, but I did. And what was great was that I went to, before I went to Catholic school, I went to a public school, pre-K to 4, or 3rd grade. And in Abbeville in the 70s, I guess the late 60s, early 70s, many Vietnamese refugees, I guess would be the term, moved to this area. And so I was always there were a ton of Vietnamese students in my classes at that middle school. I mean, at that elementary school, and I never learned, even despite the because I was a smaller kid, and I guess my parents I didn't understand what they were talking about, but I never learned discrimination. And I think that's a key important thing. As I got older, and they did say things around me, they did do things around us, around me, then I began to say, well, this isn't right, because these criteria by which they're judging people are completely ridiculous, and that was borne out for me in the stuff that I loved, and I loved my family. But part of the whole reason we're talking about any of this is because we all share that love of these characters, and there was no discrimination in Superman rescuing people, or Spider-Man, or the Enterprise going to a planet. Oh no, these people are a shade of blue that's not the right shade of blue. They have to be the Andorian shade of blue. We can't help you. No, they helped everyone, and so that really shaped it for me. And by the time that I got into high school, I had clashed with family members over this. And just when I say clash, I just said, can we just not talk about it? Because I knew I would never change their mind, and they were not going to change mine. I was convicted early on of that. And Star Trek was a big part of that. Learning about Star Trek in magazines like Starlog, watching the shows, learning how significant it was in the 60s to have that first kiss on television, to have Uhura as a character who was on the bridge and was important. And not only her, because there were other ethnicities represented, plus species. And it was like, yeah, we will. The optimism of that was so inspiring. We will make it through this. And anybody that knows Star Trek even a little knows that the history of the Federation and Starfleet and Earth is not pretty. I mean, that we had a Third World War, we had the eugenics wars, we had all of these horrible things happen before we got to the place that we would see Kirk and Spock represent, and the other crews. So that for me was always there. I had a kind of came to not blows physically with my family, and was told, if you don't want to hear about it when you're 18, you don't have to listen to these conversations. And so when I was, I think 21, there was a family holiday dinner, and the conversation came up, and I got up and I left, and led to 6 months of not being talked to by some family members, and they got over it. And and I said, that's the standard, folks. You told me I don't have to. I'm not going to stay here and hear this. And they have come to learn they will not talk that way around my children either. So Star Trek for me has been a big part of that awareness that I didn't find. It's weird because when you would, and I'm going to probably sound like I'm kind of a hypocrite here, but people who weren't fans of science fiction and genre stuff, you kind of would look at them and say, well, there's some, like, they didn't think this way. They didn't feel this way that we're talking about right now. They seem to maybe be perhaps, have some bigotry or some bigoted thoughts. And so I always wondered how much of that influenced so many people, and has continued to influence so many people. And I grew up with Picard. I know we've talked about that on other live streams. I've done videos on it. And I love The Next Generation, but James T. Kirk for me, and Ben Sisko, I think of the two, they're the ones that inspire me most. Kirk, his endless, and I'll also defend William Shatner because he continues, the man is 83, 84.
I know. Yeah.
And he's still getting crapped on, pardon the term, for his performance. But I think his performance was, as he described it, he said, I was infusing the character as he was written and envisioned by Gene Roddenberry as endlessly optimistic and hopeful and energetic. And it reminds me of, you were talking about this with Sound Engraver on your last installment of the series. Why can't Superman be portrayed as being happy, enjoying having these powers? And not only, it's not enjoying the powers, it's enjoying what he can do with them, who he can help to be able to make that difference. And so when I look at Captain Kirk, here's a guy who is enjoying being captain of the Enterprise and the difference that he can make. And he even eventually kind of tells Picard in Generations, an otherwise horrible film, it's got some, redeeming moments, but he says it's really, it's really not about the ship. It's about the crew. It's about the mission. And I think that is embodied in that series beautifully. And then Ben Sisko for me inspires me, especially more in the last 15 years of my life now that I'm a dad. And I've rewatched Deep Space Nine a few times through now. And it's, of course, it's on the BBC now. And then, he is a man who, along with Superman, there's an idea in theology of there's a Franciscan priest, Father Richard Rohr. And Father Rohr talks about and I think other people, I don't know that this is original to him. He talks about the third way. There's flight and there's fight, but then there's a third way. There's a middle way, and it's an uncomfortable place, which is why few people choose it. But the hero stands in that place. The hero is found in that place. The hero is the one, like Mark Waid and Grant Morrison actually has Superman say this. Mark Waid said it in interviews, but you have in All-Star Superman, you have Superman saying this, there's always a way. And that is to me kind of the heart of it, that the heroes, even at great personal risk, will choose the third way. And that's what makes them heroes. And so that, Ben Sisko, you look at that whole series, here's a guy caught between his Starfleet, almost you could say, I wouldn't say atheist necessarily, but kind of a religious formation. And then you have the Bajorans on the other side, and he's always standing in the middle, trying to find the right way, defending both. And that's always inspired me in the way that his priority is his son. And so here's a father who he's a Starfleet officer of this important posting, the wormhole, all this stuff, and yet Jake is his number one priority. So that's kind of just encapsulating a few things about Star Trek. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, no, that's it puts me in mind of a general principle about real heroism, and when characters are really written as heroes, there's the real strength of heroism, and this just plays into what you're saying there, whether it's about Kirk or Sisko or whatever. The real strength of heroism is about being able to resist the anger. Because in any situation, whether it's a racist situation or a situation where somebody's just wronged you, out of no, just whatever, any kind of situation you look at in a hero story, okay, this villain has done this. Okay, now the villain did this to you. Do you want peace or do you want revenge? Mm-hmm. Do you want equality or do you want revenge? Do you want safety or do you want revenge? Do you want justice or do you want revenge? And 99.99% of the population of humanity really just wants revenge. That's the first thing that their mind goes to. That's emotionally, that's what you want, is revenge. Then you can talk about these nice fluffy words like peace, equality, justice, blah, blah, blah. So, and it doesn't matter what the situation is. Heroes teach us, and I'll just reference one that I know that you love too. We've talked about this scene, but Obi-Wan Kenobi, in the Clone Wars, when Darth Maul's murdering the woman that Obi-Wan loved, and Darth Maul's trying to rub his nose in it, saying, you have no idea what the power of the dark side is. All these things I'm able to do because I give in to these passions and whatnot. And Obi-Wan says this line, which is so impactful. He says, you don't even remotely have any idea of the, imagine everything you're saying, all that power. Now imagine the strength that it takes to resist it. That is real true strength. That is true power. That is true, and that is heroism, so all, like in Star Trek that you're saying, I mean, it rings true with all these characters. I haven't watched Deep Space Nine yet, but if he's making peace between those two, races and whatever, it sounds perfectly on point and on par. I like that.
Yeah, he really, Ben Sisko is and that was one of the I just last night too, I watched the documentary What We Leave Behind, which is looking back at Deep Space Nine and talking about a lot of those themes and how that show really was caught in between The Next Generation going off the air. Well, they were on the air together, and then of course you had Voyager, and how they were even reading, the actors were reading the hate mail they were getting, the physical hate mail that they got back in the 90s. Wow. and the criticisms were, you're not on a ship and you're not doing these fun things, and this is all too and I think the gist of their comments was, you're really talking about a lot of things that make me uncomfortable, and where's the fun? The fun of Kirk and the fun of The Next Generation. But that wasn't what the show was about. It was about being in one place and working with the people you have in that one place to make a family and to find peace. And he has to do that. That's really Sisko's I guess his core mission is, how do I make peace between everyone here? And then, of course, when the Dominion War begins and you have the Klingons becoming a bigger part and the Romulans, and he really is challenged and makes huge mistakes, and does some very questionable things, but ultimately overall is a hero who has, like we talked about, that third way. And that brings me, if we can transition to
yeah, absolutely,
to Superman. It kind of brings me to this idea of vengeance, because I was a kid growing up in the late 80s. So I was about in 88. Let's see, in 88 I was 12. And, most 12-year-old kids, I'm sure, especially in the late 80s, we were into some pretty dark stuff. You probably weren't, but you were a little younger whippersnapper. You were a few years behind me. But I that era had some pretty dark stuff in it. I remember being able to see, for whatever reason, RoboCop, and when Batman 89 hit, and the visually seeing that spot on Entertainment Tonight. You see, back in the old days, kids, you didn't go to Twitter for a trailer. You had to stay on your TV and wait till it came on Entertainment Tonight and record it on a VHS tape and replay it until your parents said, stop it. And that's what we had to do. And I remember seeing that, and I knew Batman. I mean, I knew all these heroes and characters. I'd grown up with them, but here I am in adolescence, and this was a version I had never really seen. And so that drew me to go. I had read my brother's comics, but I had not really, and so I knew Wolverine, and I, of course, as you're getting in, I guess, to adolescence, you're like, man, here's this hairy guy with blades coming out of his hands. It's pretty, intense and hardcore, and you get into all that. So when I went to the comic shop wanting to read for myself, get my own comics, I got introduced to Wolverine and the Punisher and Spawn, of course, when Image hit, and at the same time Spider-Man, and yes, Superman and Batman. I was reading Batman and the Flash, Wally West, who I want to talk about as well if we have time, and I got really into that dark stuff, and Ghost Rider, and eventually, though, and I've talked about this before, Superman for me, I guess, in that kind of, I'm too cool to be into the guy that's more interested in saving people than having battles and all this. And
Stupid
so
Boy Scout, so
yeah,
childish.
I think I kind of fell into that place a little bit. So I still liked Superman, but I can remember one of the things that tonally, and honestly, 30 plus years later, I'm not sure it works either. I'd have to go back and reread it, but from memory, I don't think it works. Jim Starlin, in his A Death in the Family, where we have Jason Todd murdered by the Joker by voting. That whole sequence with Superman and Batman, I don't know that it rings true, because Superman is really unlikable in that moment. His compassion for Bruce Wayne after Jason Todd, spoiler, is killed by the Joker, it doesn't feel right to me. But I remember him saying something to Bruce, essentially, there's nothing I can do. The Joker has, diplomatic immunity and blah, blah, blah. And then Batman punching him, knowing it's not going to do any good. But I remember thinking, yeah, this Superman's kind of a jerk. But of course, at the same time, I was reading Wally West, Flash, and there was Superman. And I was kind of getting pieces here, but I was kind of lost in that. And then, of course, 1992 came around. And back then, again, kids, we didn't have the internet, and I hadn't been reading comics long enough to be really savvy about there's no such thing as death in comics. So and back then you would have magazines like Comic Scene. A magazine, by the way, is pieces of paper with information and pictures stapled together in a periodical, it's called. But you would get that. And then also my family would say, hey, I found a newspaper clipping, and here you go. It's about Superman's going to die. And I thought, well, how can he die when there's movies and they're not going to kill off Superman? You have a super chat there.
Yeah, welcome to another professor, apparently, Professor Logos. Thank you for the 999 super chat. It says Superman is more than an IP. He is pedagogical, an artistic manifestation of the enduring measures of truth, goodness, and beauty, the ideas we've been working on since Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And yeah, I agree. And in fact, you mentioned that word pedagogical. That's even one of the functions of the epic hero that Joseph Campbell points out. An epic hero should fulfill these certain functions, and one of them is the pedagogical function, and that is to teach us how to respond to the things in life we're going to encounter at each stage in life.
Mhm.
And as Fan Man's just getting into, we've seen Superman from Superboy to a married man to a parent, and even entering into death here as he's just about to get into. So thank you very much for that super chat, and great point.
Yeah, and by the way, Professor Logos have talked with him on Twitter, and he was on he was on Fan Man tonight, in the chat. And I encourage you again, Professor Logos, to do videos yourself, my friend. There's never too many professors of like-minded thought like you and Professor Geek, and probably me at some point. I'll be.
They're actually few and far between.
They're few and far between. We need all the ones we can, and he is a professor of philosophy. So you two,
sweet,
and cool. Yeah, we could have a team up here, kids. Professor Geek and Professor Logos.
That would be a lot of fun.
Waiting to be written. And so, those heroes we're talking about, let's use Spawn. Now I always thought Spawn was cool just from the horror fan in me, the monster side. But there was also, and as you've talked about, these heroes, we can't dismiss them, the anti-hero. We can't really dismiss them as, they're not heroic because they kill, and so they're not worth anything. No, there's that cathartic element. And I think for me, dealing with a lot of stuff in my family, I was bullied terribly. I'll just to bring this, to give you an idea of the context, was very close to killing myself in 8th grade because of bullying. And I was bullied at school endlessly, and I would come home, and the home life was not great, and I didn't really have a place to go except comics, except the Enterprise, and these places that had been refuges for me. And part of me wanted revenge and wanted that catharsis that came from, and I certainly wasn't going to go do it because I that's just not in my nature. I wasn't going to go shoot up the school. Of course, we've seen that sadly happen. Yeah. And so characters like the Punisher, a character who is going to go into the bullies and going to give them a taste of their own medicine, was very appealing. That's really what, you look at what Spawn is. He's an assassin. He's not much of a hero, really. He's a pure anti-hero. But there was something cathartic about that. But I had reached a point also in my spiritual life where I had a very positive role model come into my life who was a priest in our parish who, he was, his hair was brown, which I didn't know they made priests with brown hair. I thought they were all, old guys in dresses. So that was pretty amazing. And he was this dynamic, young, and down to earth person. And I thought, it blew my mind that could exist. And so he became a very strong influence in my life. My faith actually began, other than just being a cradle Catholic, it really began to matter to me. So that informed the year 1992 and the word Superman's going to die. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't know how that's going to work. Well, I got the comics, and immediately reading The Death of Superman, my mom, God bless her, she said, I talked to the comic shop owner, and they're out of those 6 issues. They're super expensive. You can't get them, but I got you the collection. I was like, oh, okay. Well, she was lying. And on Christmas Day, she gave me the 6 first prints of,
that's awesome,
of that battle. Yeah. And I sat there in my room Christmas Day, and I read that through in the individual issues. And then I reread the trade. And I just remember sitting there going, this is a guy who really bled, and of course we could work through and talk about all of the metaphors and the Christ metaphors and imagery there. But I think it resonated with me on the idea of, here's a guy using power, not for the self-satisfaction of vengeance or revenge, but using it to help other people to the point where he's willing to die and does die. And that just hooked me. That really solidified for me my love of that character. And then, of course, I was a rabid, devoted fan of Superman from then on out, and went back and read from other eras and saw the same thing, and had not been, I think, in the mindset to really appreciate Superman at the time. So I think if you're 13 and you've gone through things I'd gone through, I give you a pass. If you're a 43-year-old man and you think Superman should snap necks and, make Metropolis look like Ground Zero, I don't have as much sympathy for you. Yeah. But for me, that was amazing. And also what was great about Superman, and there's still, almost 30 years later, a lot of critics of that storyline, but that those are people that stopped reading at Superman 75. And if you read The Funeral for a Friend and then The Return of Superman, The Reign of Superman Return, you saw the effect he had on other people. And that was also very inspiring, that this guy doing the right thing because it was the right thing to do, look at the impact he had on people around him. And as a young person, that was tremendously inspiring. And I mean, you know, I was went to the seminary for 2 years because that, of course, with this priest that I was talking about, was very inspirational, making me want to make a difference. And so Superman was a part of that, and superheroes were a part of that. And I still read X-Men and Wolverine and Punisher, but it didn't have the same feeling. It was just kind of on an entertainment level.
Yeah.
It was, the connection was really with Superman. And I have a quote that I wanted to share. This was from maybe 10-ish years ago. For a lot of people, Superman is and has always been America's hero. He stands for what we believe is the best within us, limitless strength, tempered by compassion, that can bear adversity and emerge stronger on the other side. He stands for what we all feel we what we would like to be able to stand for when standing is hardest. And that goes back to that third way. He stands in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's J. Michael Straczynski, who wrote that and has talked, in fact, wrote a book, I think last year, about the impact Superman had on his life. And Batman, you know, before I get into that, I don't want to keep going here, but Batman, of course, similar there.
Yeah. We've spoken about that a lot. Yeah. I even, before we went live, you had a different picture on for your thumbnail there as a Steve Rude, I believe, image of Superman and Batman. And I'm anticipating, I think, you know, we talked about this before. I think we're going to say, or we're going to be in pretty close agreement with a lot of this kind of stuff. But while you're talking, I'm going to put up I'll throw out a link in the chat, and then I'll also maybe put it on screen. But as a blog post I wrote way back when I was still writing blog posts, but it was an analysis of that painting, of that Steve Rude painting, and how it shows symbolically how Batman and Superman truly are the two sides of the same coin in that respect. And it's not just about the evil anti-hero who's insane and beats villains to a pulp, and the and the good guy who just always does the right thing. No, they're both good guys. They both shine the light. They just do it in different contexts. But yeah, you say what you want to about it, though, because nowadays especially, you were saying people had talked to you about it on one of your videos. People are commenting me that, don't you think Batman should be insane, or isn't he really he should really be dark? And there's this nonsense Punisher Batman that people like to push, but.
Right, because they sadly don't have a basis to understand the iconic Batman, because he's gone. I mean, if you look at even in animation right now, I don't know that certainly these current DC animated films don't give you the iconic Batman. Now, I haven't watched them, but I can't imagine it's based on the New 52, so it's going to lack in a lot of ways. Yeah, I had an interaction with someone on one of my Superman videos talking about the Snyder Cut and all this, and they brought up Batman, and they said, Batman is an anti-hero. And I haven't replied to them yet, and I probably won't. Batman's not an anti-hero. Batman is a pure hero. And depending on how you define these terms, and I think you and I, like you said, will be on the same page, he is both inspirational and aspirational. And how many times have I heard people who've never read a Batman comic book who said the story of Batman as a self-made individual inspires me to become a police officer, to become a soldier, to become a dad, whatever it is. That is the idea there, that this is not a man. And as far as the idea he's crazy, well, you can thank Frank Miller for that, because that's how that was the inability of a lot of writers to really understand these characters means they give you their version because they can't crack it otherwise. So, we see that with a lot of deconstructions. And I don't know that Frank Miller set out to deconstruct Batman. I just think he didn't understand or didn't believe that anybody would want to understand or accept somebody like Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne is very simple. He's a 10-year-old kid. His parents are murdered in front of his eyes. And as any kid at 10 will tell you, they see things very simply. And he decides at their graveside, I am going to war on all crime, not for vengeance. Although he goes through that, that's something he has to overcome. He does go through anger and the desire for vengeance, yes. But he's doing it so that no one else goes through what he did. That's how a kid thinks. And that's, I mean, Grant Morrison's talked about that at great length in a lot of interviews I've read and heard with him, that Batman is kind of in a lot of ways this not childish, but childlike reaction to violence and to injustice and to tragedy. And I think that's a brilliant thing, because we often dismiss these stories. It's for children. Well, there's childish and there's childlike. And I think that Batman, for me, and I just want to read from a comic. I think I sent you this comic a few years ago. Shadow of the Bat, number 13, by Alan Grant and the great Norm Brayfogle, God rest his soul. Shadow of the Bat was during the heyday post Batman 89, and they did some really great stories here. And one of them is called The Nobody. And this may be, for me, the single greatest Batman story ever told. And so much so that I sent it to Professor Geek years ago. And it's one that I have multiple copies of. And I'm going to spoil a little bit of it, but I encourage you to still read it, because what happens is Bruce Wayne is out on the town as Batman one night, and he's having an altercation with these criminals. His cowl is ripped, and there's a homeless man who sees that Bruce Wayne's Batman, and he wants to use that knowledge to get money to keep drinking, because he's, of course, he's living on the streets and he's given into drinking and a bum and all these terms we would use. And so he goes to this criminal and says, I can tell you who Batman is. And he tries to get these criminals to give him some money, and they refuse, and they end up stabbing him. And as he's dying, the criminals say, we are gonna pretend we know who Batman really is, and then we're gonna go and sell this information. And so you have Penguin, Riddler, Joker, they're all on screens, they're bidding. And I think this might have been kind of a reworking of a Golden Age story. And the Batman takes care of all that. He takes out the criminals, and then the hobo, the homeless guy, goes to Wayne Enterprises, and he goes in and asks to see Bruce Wayne. And the last page is this interaction, and he sits in the chair, he's bleeding to death, and he asks Bruce Wayne, why do you do it, Batman? And Bruce is unable to really respond. He says, I. And then the man who we find out had actually lost his job, he and his family were homeless, his wife and children left him, and then he fell into drinking and was a homeless man. He dies, and then we see Batman, Bruce Wayne, now in costume as Batman, and he's on a rooftop looking out over Gotham, and he says, I do it for the weak and the scared and the oppressed. I do it for the victims, the innocent, the abused. I do it to try to end the suffering, and I do it for the nobodies. And that is just a gut punch, because that is what the hero does. That is who the hero is for. And that's the Batman. He is the Dark Knight, and he's not some guy who's James Bond with all these gadgets, and he's not some paramilitary monster who delights in breaking bones and cracking skulls. He's not crazy. In fact, again, Grant Morrison, in an interview with your pal Kevin Smith, he said, people in that Scottish accent, people often say that Bruce Wayne's crazy, but he's hyper sane, isn't he? He's hyper sane. His reaction, instead of destroying himself because of tragedy or hurting other people because of tragedy, his reaction was to help other people, and that's hyper sane. And that's Batman. So for me, that really, I remember reading that, and that came out again. I want to say that issue came out around 93. And as a kid in high school, that was just, wow, what am I doing for the nobodies? And what that was really the resonance of these characters for me. That's not saying I don't like the dark gothic aspect of Batman. I don't like the cool gadgets and the fights, but that's not the heart of the character. The heart of the character is, and again, you go back to the Golden Age, who was creating these heroes? I mean, Siegel and Schuster, Bill Finger, and to a lesser extent, Bob Kane, but they were guys who were not wealthy, and they were creating heroes that could do the things for them that the police weren't doing, because there was corruption and there was crime and they were making heroes that they needed at the time, and
Yeah.
a lot of that I think has either been misconstrued or is just people just don't know it. You know, certainly in the case of Batman.
I didn't realize this post was only 3 paragraphs because it plays into what you're saying there so nicely. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But it also, this image, I think, is this from the Carl Kessel World's Finest, or it might be from the Dave Gibbons one? I can't remember.
It's a Gibbons. Yeah,
it's a Gibbons one. Okay, the Carl Kessel World's Finest has a moment where Superman meets Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, for the first time. Batman wants his opinion on her, and he tells her that he says, "I'm kind of, she sees Barbara Gordon, how bubbly she is, and he's everything." And he says, "I'm kind of shocked that you decided to emulate Batman with your name and look. You're so bright and shining, and he's a little dark." And she says, "Batman's not dark at all. He's the one shining the light for us in this darkness. He just has to take on the appearance of it." And that's kind of what I used to write this. I'll just write, it's just 3 little paragraphs. So I love this Steve Rude piece that serves as a cover for the Gibbons Rude World's Finest. Superman, confident in the warm and safe sunlight, stands atop an eagle, justice, and sends forth doves, peace. Batman stands at night in front of the artificial rays of the bat signal. It shines in the same manner as the sun that surrounds it on the bottom. Batman as a hero is a subtle balance which many writers and artists fail to keep, plunging him into the darkness of an almost anti-hero. With the composition of this painting, Rude shows Batman to be carrying on the same work as Superman, only at night and in nighttime forms. For Batman, the Eagle of Justice is a gargoyle, gothic protector against a superstitious lot. His doves are bats, winged creatures able to move in the dark. Batman and Superman aren't so different. Rude shows them to be unified by light. Superman radiates its warmth by example, and Batman shines it into the neglected corners of a dark city. Some of us are more inclined towards Superman. We like the sun and feel led to share its warmth. But others, and even all of us at some time or another, have Batman moments in which we need to confront a darkness that simply won't respond to warmth. In those moments, it's important not to succumb to the darkness we're battling in the absence of the sun. Remember that you are still shining the light, even if sometimes it's the bat signal.
That is beautiful.
Thank you. But no, everything you said just ties in. It plays it in, sets that up. I mean, everything you're saying about, especially that issue, where Batman on the ledge and talking about why he does this and that. I mean, that is the character. That's the heart of the character that no one seems to get. He has to be demented. He has to be so tortured. No, he doesn't. Stop it. That's cliche. That's an easy cliche to fall into as a writer. It's nothing original or groundbreaking about it. You're just like every other schlub who can't, conceive of anything higher than, the slug on the rock looking over the other slugs.
Right. Yeah. Well, and Frank Miller, I think, really never understood Bruce Wayne, but he understood Matt Murdock, and I think he still really didn't understand Matt Murdock. But he thought, oh well, this is Matt Murdock's crazy, Daredevil's crazy, which he isn't. But I'll go. That's Batman too. Batman's the same, and he isn't.
Yeah.
And there are characters that are crazy, but that's, we don't really call them heroes generally. I mean, the Punisher, I think you could probably make some arguments that he's got some mental issues and not a hero, So, but yeah, that's beautiful. You need to just do a very brief video where you read that and then just put that out there and let people watch and listen to that over and over.
Maybe I might do that. I might really piss a lot of people off now, though, today. Oh, the Snyder Cut's here. Punisher, Batman's back.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. No, that's why we need it. That's why we need it. And another thing about Batman that's very interesting, again, going back to Grant Morrison, in his interview, he did a very lengthy series of interviews with Kevin Smith. And one of the things he said is that he started to think, what was very interesting to me about this Grant Morrison guy is that he said, when I worked on All-Star Superman, I actually began to become a better person. Working on him made me a better person.
Oh, wow.
So did working on Batman. He said, I began to see the world better and see the good in people. I began to actually be transformed by it. And he said, and as I began to really work on Batman, this was his run after Infinite Crisis that got more press, sadly, than the wonderful Paul Dini run on Detective Comics. But he said, I really began to see Batman as a kind of Bat Christ, because there's this idea of a person who has no powers. He has no he doesn't have the invulnerability of Superman, but he is still putting himself out there and is risking his life every night. Every time he goes out, he knows it could be the last time, but yet he still does it. And that vulnerability is is a huge part of his character. Whereas with Superman is vulnerable too, although everybody says, oh, you just have to hurt his heart because it's all you can hurt. No, Superman can be physically hurt. He can also be emotionally harmed. But with Batman, I think there's something working on a different level there, where the maybe gulf between being us everyday people and then becoming Batman is a little shorter, but at the same time that's a danger. Thanks, Chris Nolan. Oh yeah, anybody, man. I'm gonna go out with Anne Hathaway, and I are gonna go around Europe. You just need the mask, man. Anybody can be Batman because you want to fight. No, only Bruce Wayne is Batman. Now I know there's Batman Beyond, yes, and I love that too. That's fine, but the character at its core, who really is the Batman, that's always going to be Bruce Wayne. No one else had that experience or that reaction. That's why even somebody like Dick Grayson, who has that similar tragedy, didn't become Batman. He became Robin. Only Bruce Wayne would become Batman, and that's something I think that gets glossed over or missed entirely.
The Rich and Mighty wants to know, can Booster Gold be count as aspirational? Well, he's got a lot of issues. I mean, he's supposed to go insane and have to go to sanctuary and murder some people. That's
version. I think that because I mean, from my memory, reading his stuff in the late '80s and knowing a little bit about Booster from Superman, he was a guy who really just wanted fortune and glory, and that's why he wanted to become a hero, and then eventually does become one and realizes that he can make a difference. And I would say, yeah, that's something to aspire to. I don't know if you would agree.
I haven't read enough of his stories, which are just about him. My encounters with Booster Gold are him coming into other people's stories, and more often than not, in that case, he's sort of a comic relief-ish type. But yeah, I could see how he could be written as sort of a fan aspiring to these other characters. And in that, my sense, though, like I said, I'd defer to your opinion because you've read more of his stories. My sense is, I would say, cathartic motivational, somebody who's really trying to do the right thing and be like other people, but has failings, has weaknesses for money and stuff like that, and trying to overcome them. So I would say cathartic motivational in that aspect. But I mean, like I said, I haven't really read a lot of his stories like you have. So
he's much more in the vein of Peter Parker than
So cathartic motivational in that sense.
Yeah. But he's a great character, and sadly,
and cathartic motivational, they're still inspirational because they are motivating us to do better, like they're doing. So just because we focus so much on the aspirational doesn't mean that the cathartic motivational aren't vital as well. And we just focus on the aspirational because that's the one that everybody wants to shovel aside and not pretend doesn't matter anymore.
Right? Yeah, that one's the one most under attack for some reason. The irony is that that's being lost culturally, and yet at a time when we need it most. If another person compares these times to World War II, I'm gonna. The times we're in are as bad. It's the Greatest Generation. Just as bad. Well, the Greatest Generation, among many other things that made them the Greatest Generation, is that they created heroes like Superman and Batman. We aren't doing that. We're deconstructing them during this time period. So don't equate us with that generation.
Yeah, but did you know Trump is literally Hitler?
Oh, that's right. The reincarnation. He's like who was that villain in Captain America and Shield comics who was like Hitler's brain in another body? I don't remember. I'm sure somebody in the chat will remind me. That's who really Trump is. He just keeps hopping bodies. Hitler does.
Did you want to segue to Spider-Man since you brought him up a little bit, or you still want to? I mean, it's your interview, so you want to keep on Batman and these characters. That's fine. But if you wanted to segue any of those, feel free to.
I do want to talk about Spider-Man. I have him on not. It wasn't on purpose, but he's kind of at the bottom of the list. But I'm going to jump to him after because this is another hero who's a lot like him, and probably fits into that idea of the hero who is cathartic and motivational, who's trying to do the right thing. Here's a guy though who grew up more than really anybody else that I can think of, unless you look at the Silver Age with Superboy. Here's a guy who was always a hero. He was always a superhero, and that's Wally West.
Mm-hmm. Another trickster,
yeah. He started out, and the thing about him that's so beautiful is that he, like us, idolized this inspirational hero to the point where eventually the opportunity came for him to become that hero and surpass him. And, and that's a lot of the Silver Age guys. He's not better than Barry Allen. Okay, whatever. Old time. Whatever. Boomer. No. What's brilliant about a character like Wally West and a character like Peter Parker is that their inspiration we don't even really know. And that's kind of how I feel about Barry Allen, although I don't feel like we should have necessarily killed him off. I think he should have been perhaps reworked so that Wally could be in that role. But we love those characters because Wally and Peter loved them, and that's how we came to know them. So we knew Barry Allen was almost better developed when he was dead through Wally West, which I think is also kind of a commentary on these heroes in our lives, that they become real through our acting on that inspiration. What I've always loved about Wally West is, and I, we hear a lot about representation, and I don't want to diminish that at all. I think it's very important. I think some people are allowed to say it's important and other people don't get to say it. I'm going to tell you why it was important, because I was a redhead, and being a redhead, I was the only redhead in my family and immediate family. So, and extended it. The only redheads in our family were in another state, and I never saw them. I saw them maybe once or twice in my life. And that was another added to the list of things to make fun of this guy over. He's fat. He's a nerd, and look, he's got red hair and he's pale. So that was always something that I guess I didn't consciously go, man, I really wish I could. Where's a superhero with red hair? But when I discovered Wally West, one of the very cool things about it was this guy's got red hair and green eyes like me. And not only that, but he's got a sense of humor. And that's what appeals to me about Wally. And I also see it in Peter Parker. They use their powers, but there's a great deal of their personality that comes through as another thing they use to inspire people, with humor and with charm, and with compassion. And I sent you a picture. You were saying that I'm a diva. I sent you a picture from inside the Flash issue number 54.
Hang on, I'll put it up.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah, I'll get it here in a second. But I just want to thank Rich and Mighty.
Yes.
Talking about what inspires him about Booster Gold. And yeah, I mean that's what cathartic motivationals do to us. They overcome those odds and stuff like that. So that's a great example. I'm not really a big Booster guy, so I don't know a lot about him. So I appreciate you guys filling me in with that cool stuff about him. But
and he makes a good point there, because Booster, even when he can't get that glory or recognition, he still does it anyway. He doesn't just give up. He's like, well, I'm going to still be a hero, and that's very inspiring and motivational.
All right, I got the image up.
Yeah, this was an issue I read as a kid, and it just, first of all, it was one of those comics that I know it's not drawn by Jack Kirby. I know that Alan Moore didn't write it, but it was one of those comics that really worked for me in showing what comics were capable of. And it is Wally in his awesome The Flash number 50 suit, which this was a symbol of him actually becoming even more. He had been wearing a copy of Barry's since Crisis on Infinite Earths. Issue 50, he gets his own suit, and it's reflective, and it's got the white eye. I loved all of it. I like
that one. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I always thought it kind of made sense too, because it protects his eyes, and it just, and I love the darker red, and the lightning bolts come together at kind of an angle on the midsection. And so
the belt. Yeah.
My favorite Flash, and my favorite Flash costume is that one. In this issue, he's on a plane, and he had won the lottery. I think Wally had won the lottery, and that was another testament to, and this is pre-Mark Waid. This is William Messner-Loeb's writing. And this was a testament to the character as well. He wins the lottery, and he's still the Flash. He's not like, oh, I can just sit around and take care of myself now. He still wants to live up to being a hero. And everybody also, that was a great thing about Wally, which I kind of think is where Marvel stole this later, was everybody knew Wally West was the Flash. He was a public superhero. He came forward and hi, I'm the Flash, and everybody knew, and he'd go into towns and go, hey, it's the Flash, even if he was just he wasn't in costume. So Tony Stark kids didn't come up with that first. All right. That was Wally West. Damn it. Darn it. But in this issue, he's on a plane, and there are terrorists on there. And in the course of taking them out, and this was late 80s or early 90s, so this was a very relevant kind of thing, terrorists on an airplane. There's a hole blown in the fuselage, and they're sucked out, and this stewardess, or what are they called today? That's not the PC term. I don't know what they're called.
Flight attendants.
Flight attendants. They're attending the flying. If you're not outside of the plane flapping your arms, I don't see how you're attending the flight. But and so she gets blown out as well. So he saves these guys. And he actually, this was one of the great things too, that I just remember reading it as a kid, kind of with my mouth open. He can't fly. What does he do? He shoots at super speed out of the plane into the sky to go after these people. And I know you might be thinking, hey, that was an Iron Man too. Happened first here. And so here's a speedster who's a guy who can just run. Oh, the Flash can just run fast. No. So he shoots out of there and he saves these other guys. I think the terrorists actually maybe had they maybe had parachutes, but he goes after her and he has to accelerate, and he finally catches up to her and he holds her close, and he uses his super speed to kind of create a vortex of wind to slow down their descent, but they still kind of crash through some trees and get cut up. And here they are surviving, and you always heard his inner monologue, which is another thing I loved about him. And he's saying in the issue, nobody dies on my watch. And here he says, it's a rule, nobody dies. And that's the end of the story.
That's awesome.
And this is one of those characters that we don't really maybe think about it being inspirational or quite as having that value for life. But Wally West always had it, and learned it from Barry Allen.
I like that the end is still written in his monologue box. So it's kind of like, that's what he's saying. Like, that's end point, period. We don't go any farther. Nobody dies. The end.
That's right.
Done,
And,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to get you off of Wally West, because I think there's a lot more to say about him. I've loved hearing you talk about him before. But Rich and Mighty, we'll just kind of put a pin in this for later. For $5 Canadian, says, I guess my latest appreciable hero is the Nightcrawler then. And the Nightcrawler is another really great character. And not an expert again, but I would say aspirational from what I follow, because I really appreciate his stories too. But I think I might have heard you talk about him one time or another. But yeah, we can come back around to that. I don't want to stunt the Wally talk, because it's good stuff.
Yeah, I read mostly about Nightcrawler from Uncanny X-Men, Chris Claremont, and then he went on to, I think he was on Excalibur for a while. That was when there were like 30 teams back in the late 80s and 90s. He studied to be a priest. He was one of the rare Catholic characters that wasn't portrayed in a negative way.
Yeah.
And Christian characters at the time that wasn't portrayed negatively. So I guess I would have to go back and all I remember is that he was a poor, if memory serves, he grew up poor, and he had been abandoned. But he was born of a peasant and seen as a devil, and despite his appearance, he never did harm. He didn't hurt anyone else, and he used his abilities to help people.
Yeah.
So he was always really,
and never wanted to lash out in revenge either for the treatment he had.
That's right. Yeah, and very tragic. I mean, there's some heartbreaking stuff with Nightcrawler, and they eventually came up with those. The Beast eventually came up. Hank McCoy came up with these image inducers that would allow he and Nightcrawler to just go and get a drink somewhere and not have to worry about being stared at. And it was some great writing there in the X-Men back then. What I think with Wally, the other thing about Wally West is that he is one of these characters too who doesn't say die. He does not really ever give up, and he there are many moments. In fact, one of the highlights, this was Age Boomer's got a super chat there and a question.
There's a question for you though. That's why I put it up there, because what did you think of him in the Justice League animated series?
I loved that they used Wally, and I thought it was a little more jokey than I would have liked, but although that was true to the character, but yeah, I never had any problems with him on there. I was really surprised that they went with the characters they did. They couldn't use Hal Jordan, because at the time he was a murderer. He was, Parallax.
Yeah.
But they could have used Barry, and I'm very surprised that they used Wally, and because Wally, kind of, you need to explain. Depending on how you're going to do it, you'd have to explain who is he? But they were able to really preserve Wally West without making him kind of like what they did with Disgust Us League, and they've done in some other even in the comics with Bendis. Oh, hey, it's Barry Allen, but we'll just write him as a jokester like Wally West. Well, and Wally's not a jokester either. He's not Deadpool. He's
more of a lighthearted kind of tricksterish, though, isn't he? I mean,
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that might be why they included him on the team, just to have sort of like you said, the jokey kind of thing, but just somebody to lighten it up now and then.
Yeah, because I mean, you had some pretty serious cats on that team. Yeah. Even going with the Green Lantern they chose was, because Hal's a little bit more happy-go-lucky than John Stewart, and John was pretty intense on the show. But Wally never gives up, and there's one of the storylines that I think people look at when they look at Wally West. They talk more about Mark Waid and Jeff Johns, and that's fine. But William Messner Loebs came before and after Mike Barron, who launched that title and really did this story as William Messner Loebs that we just talked about. He really defined a lot of this. But Waid wrote, I think, some of he loved Wally West and would often write in the letters pages. He would write explaining why he loved the character so much. And one of the things that he said was the idea that this was the first sidekick to fulfill the promise. He was the first one to actually take over the mantle and then make it his own and do it justice. And that was his journey. That was Wally West's journey. So what Waid did that was brilliant was he did a story called The Return of Barry Allen. And he had Barry Allen just show up one day on Jay Garrick's doorstep. And Wally thought, I've made peace with Barry Allen. I've got my own version of the suit now. I am the Flash, and I'm always going to be living up to this. And he was haunted by that. But he was always, we found out Wally's speed would go out for periods of time. Could never really figure out scientifically. He would go and talk to Star Labs, Tina McGee. Why is my speed? Sometimes it was gone completely. And it turned out through the course of that story, The Return of Barry Allen and Terminal Velocity, which came later on, that I think it was Terminal Velocity. Somebody can correct me. But Wally found out he was actually holding himself back because he was always living up. He always thought, I can never live up to the standards of Barry Allen. I'll never be as good as Barry. So in The Return of Barry Allen, he really does finally learn that he can, not only has he been holding himself back, but that he's actually faster than Barry, and defeats this Barry Allen, who turns out to be the Reverse Flash from a different point in the time stream, because he's technically dead at that time. It's a long story. Barry had killed him. But in that story, we really see Wally even coming more confident. And then I think it's Terminal Velocity, where he has to go into the Speed Force to defeat the forces of Cobra, which is this, not the one from G.I. Joe Cobra, but it's a terrorist organization in DC Comics. And it's a beautifully written story because he goes into the Speed Force and doesn't lose himself. His anchor is Linda. Linda is his anchor to come back. And in that story, he fully realizes, yes, not only am I faster than Barry, but I've always had this ability within me, and he develops new uses for the Speed Force. That's the storyline where he discovers the Speed Force. And it leads up to issue 100. So at no point he's even willing to die in that storyline to defeat these villains. And just, there's never a moment where Wally West, there's not a whole lot of Wally West ever really that I can remember sitting kind of feeling bad for himself, sorry for himself, and I don't know. It's not like as written by Tom King in Heroes in Crisis, which is another reason that story is so horrible, is that's not Wally West. He's not plagued with self-doubt.
Tom King's really going to go down in history as like one of the absolute worst things to ever happen to comic books.
Absolutely.
He really is.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just as we're kind of slowly winding down the time here, there's one more question here for you, which kind of pertains to Wally, and maybe we'll wrap up the Wally thing here. But I think you and I would agree that taking away that amazing character you just described, let's do away with him. Instead, let's create this diversity Wally West, and then let's make him be moody and dark and sullen. That was utterly ridiculous. But I'm curious what you think, because I know you read some of Rebirth. What did you think of when they brought Wally back, but they also kept the Black Wally, who was like the kids version of it now or whatever, and he wasn't so sullen or something? I don't know. What did you think of the three of them coexisting, or do you really think there's room archetypically for that?
I kind of felt like that was once you decided to bring Wally back, you know, because I think the other Wally was revealed to be his relative and his cousin,
Yeah.
so he's
Mhm.
Wallace.
Also, another cousin named Wally, but Wallace, yeah.
Yeah, that was how they. And I think the reason for that was we can't undo this character because of the outcry that we will have. I don't mind him being existing necessarily, but I wonder if there's no need. What I would guess I would wonder is, okay, so what role does he fill? Because technically, once you bring Barry back, and this is the thing, I did not like that Barry Allen came back, and I don't want to get into a bashing this individual here, but that was Dan Didio saying we're bringing back all the Silver Age versions at the expense of their successors. So technically, really, what the status quo should be is Barry, Wally's the Flash. That doesn't mean Barry couldn't exist. I mean, I actually have ideas as to I always thought, you know, if you read any of the Flash before Crisis, he was in the future, and the only reason he got involved with Crisis is because I think Batman appeared to him somehow, and he came back in time and died. But he was living in the future with Iris, and that's how we got Bart eventually.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah,
So I always thought, why not just have him go back and live in the future with her?
exactly.
Saying, hey, my legacy is taken care of with Wally, and then everybody can be happy. And then I would have him become part of like a team of heroes across the multiverse would be my solution.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But if you don't, so then where do you put Bart if you have the second Wally West? And I think that's the problem. I think
Exactly. There's no room for impulse. You know?
but I don't think they really could deal with that issue without, you know, the outcry, sadly.
Yeah.
And he was not
a
fully developed character as far as I know. Right?
He started to get a little bit of legs underneath him as Rebirth went on, but the problem was they didn't have any kind of construct around him to make it work. Like Teen Titans was a joke with Damian being little Hitler man, you know, and you know, dictator and going into the dark side and just being stupid Damian stuff. So Teen Titans was not even any fun to read anymore. But for a little while there, they were starting to get some legs underneath the character. But yeah, they create these characters not for nothing other than the diversity, you know, diversity points, you know, intersectional points. That's the only reason they're created. No one really likes them. Certain groups of people will say they like them. Yeah, I don't mean like, you know, you can like the character, but I mean, no one really loves these characters or follows them like the other ones who organically grew on us. These are forced on us for political reasons. You know, people will just say they really love this character because it, you know, matches their agenda or whatever. But so then you have these filler characters that no one can get rid of because, like you said, you know, the outcry. But now you just got to make a universe work with all these fillers in there, muddying up the archetypes of the real deals. So yeah, it's.
You could shunt him off to another Earth, I guess. I mean, I you know, there's other ways you could do it, but how could you have an investment in a character with that little development or time? He hadn't even been around. That's why when I would read arguments, I love the New 52 Superman. I'm thinking, well, what's there to love?
Exactly.
He's been around for 5 years and he's hardly developed. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Let's see the time. We are at just about an hour and 15 minutes. Obviously you've got many more heroes to talk about, and I'm sure you got many more personal anecdotes or whatever is a link. So we'll definitely get you back. But is there anything else that you kind of wanted to make sure was said in this first installment to kind of cap it all off?
I think that I kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, I really feel that. And I just dropped a video on this. Wow, listen to me talking like the kids. You saying terms like clapback and me saying I dropped a video. I don't know why I even said dropped a video. I released a video not long before we went here on this stream about how we geeks can think about how we can maybe use our fandom to make a statement about these ideals that we do believe in and do live up to, but maybe we aren't, you know. That's the beauty of science fiction and the beauty of, I think, fantasy is that we can talk about these issues in a way that does not lead to division, further division and volatile kind of exchanges, because we can say, hey, we're talking about these aliens on another planet. Really, we're talking about us. And yet we're doing it in a way that is not threatening. And so I know I had a student, one of my former students who does have, you know, is a biracial family. And he encouraged everybody on that's friends with him. He said, you know, a lot of you will post very long over periods of days about a small thing that you're dealing with, something in sports, or you having to wear a mask to go out shopping and you don't care for that, and you don't post about when these things happen in the news. And that's not, I mean, I'm not agreeing 100% with him that, we don't want to make a blanket judgment as to why, because no one is forced or required to do that. But it did kind of really stick with me, and I've been thinking about it. How can we use these things that we feel so strongly about? How can we use them to make a difference? It's kind of like, the example I would give is, imagine if you're in a church, in Catholic terms, we call it a parish, but your particular church, you believe all these wonderful things about helping people and going out and helping the poor and feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and all these wonderful things, and you never do it. You just sit in your church building and say, hey, we're all great, aren't we? Yes, we are. We sure do love other people. We sure do. Meanwhile, you're only loving yourselves. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if we do really believe that these characters are inspirational, and if we do believe in the values that they have, then we need to look for ways. I don't know what they are. They're going to be different for every person. It may be as easy and as simple as, during all of this, you say, as people did a few years ago, I think in 2016 with the election, I'm posting a picture of a character that's inspirational or fun, but maybe you share a little bit about it. And maybe you say, this character stands for this, and I think the world could use some more of this right now. And that's it. Just to kind of say to people, hey, these characters are more than just children's entertainment. And many of them, when you look at Star Trek, but even comics, really many of them are rooted in some kind of injustice that led to their inspiration, and they continue to inspire those of us that know this. But I think we should share that with more people, because I think it could offer people right now who want positivity. I've seen a lot of posts in the last few days like, please tell me something good. Please show me something that's positive or inspiring. Well, there you go. There's a kid in, I don't remember what state he lives in. He's named, he's called President Austin. And I think Austin is maybe 10. He goes in a blue t-shirt and a red cape, and he gives out food to the homeless. And he's been doing this for years. He's been, he went viral on social media. He's been interviewed by every major network. And I follow him on
Super Austin.
Super Austin, yeah. And then
President Austin.
Yeah, well, they started a President Austin movement.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Austin for president. So now people also call him President Austin.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But yeah, he started out as Super Austin, and he's always wearing Superman's colors and the cape. And it's like, wow, this kid gets it on a very basic level. So it isn't even about, it's not childish or children's entertainment. It's something that children can see that we miss out on because we've become adults, and yet it's truth. And so maybe it's just something like sharing that kind of story. Maybe it's looking at, how can I make a difference in these times? What can I do to bring peace? And what can I do to maybe inspire people? So I would just encourage people to think about that, so that we don't just kind of sit on that inspiration and not really share it with other people. Yep. If other people are like my family, their eyes glaze over when you try to talk about this, and they're like, yeah, so we're going to go watch, I'm going to play Roblox. I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but okay. But I don't think that should stop us. I think we should try to do that. And the other thing I want to say is, sadly, it looks like we're having a bit of a snowball effect happening with this Snyder cut. There's talk of an Ayer cut. There's talk that Cavill might come back to the role. I've done a number of videos on this. I will do more, but I really encourage everybody, as this happens, if you are cool with all that, if you're excited about all that, I would kind of really like to know why. I would like you to think about, what have these versions done for you? And really look at that and go, are fans really winning with this? Are these fans that have won by getting this cut? Interesting. I don't know that they're fans necessarily of what we've been talking about tonight and what we've been about. I think they're fans of something else. But I would just encourage people to remember that, this is not those characters. And if you do want to find them, they're there. And there are people that want to talk about them. There are people that want to share them, people in this chat, yourself, of course, myself. So it don't say, well, I don't know where I would find it. We would always be willing, if you reach out to us. It might take us a while to get back to you, but we will tell you, go read this book or watch this movie or this television show. That's the version. That's the real character. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah, thanks. Let me wrap it up with this. David Deister's super chat. Thank you very much, sir. $8 says, "Are video game characters inspirational, like Mario, Sonic, Link, Ryu? Are they?" I said Ryu. I think it's the ways they always say. Do not say
the
Ryu.
most,
You know, the Japanese Ryu. Are they inspirational?
the most
And
inspirational is Simon Belmont and in
from
Castlevania,
Captain N and the
and
Game
never
Master.
none none of the characters, Professor Geek, because I listened to Sound Engraver. Man, I was like, I wish I had listened to this live. None of the characters in these newfangled games that have stories, none of those are inspirational. But Simon Belmont can whip in every direction. That is inspirational. I'm running on that for president this year. Whip in every direction 2020. That's going to be my.
That's quite a slogan.
No, they can be inspirational, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, the point is, inspirational is kind of a neutral term. I mean, I can be inspired to take a life or to save a life. What is the inspiration? And all those characters you mentioned, yeah, I mean, a lot, especially of those characters you mentioned, they've evolved past just video games. They're in other media as well, and especially like Link. I know a lot of people look up to the character. I was really, I mean, people think it's kind of a sissy character. I don't care. He's awesome. Sora from Kingdom Hearts. Man, the character inspires the crap out of me. But so yeah, absolutely, definitely. Now we talk about terms like aspirational versus cathartic motivational. These are just different types of inspiration that these characters can provide, and the different and then we can get into sub archetypes like tricksters and frontiersmen or whatever. That's the different ways in which they can impart that inspiration or whatever. So yeah, no, absolutely. And then I think Daniel Herring got another $2 super chat in there. 4-hour Ghostbusters 2016. Bring baby to the trash. Oh, talking about a director's cut. I think as we need a 4 hours Ghostbusters 2016. Nice.
Just bring an asteroid at that point. Let's just wrap it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Reboot humanity.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, well, thanks for being the guest here, Fan-Man. We'll definitely have you back again and talk about a lot more of these. But got a lot of good characters out, and yeah, maybe you should tweet out a couple titles for people who want to hear some of these titles you mentioned or whatever, and get the names, whatever. You can go to his Twitter. Links to his channel as well as others' channels are below in the description. I do want to point people to Sound Engraver's channel, who's going to be streaming here in just under an hour, maybe under a half hour at this point. Yeah, under a half hour, about 20 minutes or whatever. So definitely go check out that stream. She's going to talk more about melody and whatnot, but it always strays into some sort of geeky topics or another as well at some point. But she's got a lot of good stuff to say about melody and whatnot.
Who's Melody? No, I'm kidding. Can I plug some stuff too?
Yeah, of course.
Some program notes, because I see a lot of names in here, and I'm thinking, I don't know who you people are, but why aren't you on my channel? There could be reasons. Who knows? I will not do for Fan-Man tonight, this Friday night. We're going on vacation. I got my dates mixed up, and I just learned today, we're leaving in like 3 days. So tomorrow, Second Cup Cafe is a morning show that I do. It's a live stream, 10 or 10:30 in that time period, Central Time. And then I'll do another one on Wednesday, and that'll be it for this week. So be on the lookout for that. And I also will have some videos about, I'm doing another installment in my series of Superman's Greatest Adventures, which are my favorite Superman stories. And I'm going to be talking about Action Comics 775, which I think is given what's happening with the Snyder Cut and talk of Cavill, I think is very important to talk about that issue. And that issue, and you've talked about it before, I know, but I'm going to put a new focus on it. So just be looking for that this week.
Yeah. Sounds good. So yeah, so I'll see a lot of you over there on Sound Engraver's channel, and if everything goes as planned, tomorrow we should be doing the Maltese Falcon rewatch on my channel here at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So see you back for that, and all the usual stuff that's happening. So take care, everyone, and until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love.